Welcome back to Hemp with Gigi, the channel that reviews grow equipment and gives you tips and tricks to keep your plants happy and healthy. Today, we're here for Dr. MJ CoCo from CoCo for Cannabis. This is the after show. We're going to have Mike Lynn from Atreum Lighting join, and we're just going to talk about the amazing Hydra 3200. So I'll pass it over to Dr. MJ CoCo. Dr. MJ CoCo, are you there?
I am. Hey, Hemp with GG, how's it going?
Hey, Doc. Hopefully I didn't rush you there.
No, I got here just as your graphic was playing for the little intro. Hopefully we got the audience following us over here. We were trying to get the link up in the chat there for everybody that just watched the premiere over on my channel. Thanks for coming over to the Hemp with GG channel to do a live after show.
Heck yeah, that's an amazing light. Congratulations to the winner.
Yeah, Hydroplanes Drifter, and he said he would come on the show, so I think he's hopefully getting hey, Hydroplanes Drifter, if you can hear me, if you can send that email to Jordan, both to claim your prize and to get the link to join us here on the show. So her email is admin@cocoforcannabis.com. And she's probably here in the chat too, but that'd be the easiest thing if you can just send her an email. And then we got Mike Lynn here from Atreum. So let me welcome Mike into the conversation.
Hey, Doc, glad to be here.
Yeah. I think the Hydra 3200 is a big hit with the audience here. I mean, that par map is just, I told you this right after I tested. I'm like, okay, well, I see the selling point in the fixture.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I mean, this is my first time doing this whole live event, and that was a lot of fun. Like your countdown, that was awesome. And like transition over to this, yeah, the whole thing. I was super impressed by it.
Cool. Cool. I love the countdown. The fact that there's a countdown offered where it's like random little sort of creatures cultivating plants is apparently like what's going on there. So I just found that that's so appropriate for.
Yeah, it's
for
very zen.
Yeah, exactly. It gets you in the right sort of mood. But yeah, no, that was fun, and I like doing the live premieres, doing the giveaways during the live premieres because it just brings a lot of people into the chat, and you get a lot of sort of energy about the video that way. So, congratulations again to Hydroplanes Drifter because this really is. The best light out there, I think, is a single fixture for filling in a 4x2 tent. I mean, there's other fixtures, I suppose, that could fit in a 4x2 tent that might be able to produce more light. But, what I really liked about the Hydra 3200 was, first of all, it's got probably more power than you really need. It does an excellent job of distributing that light. If you took this much PPF and tried to put it into a fixture that didn't distribute the light as well, the hot spot in the middle would be much hotter and the edges would be much lower. You wouldn't be able to get that much light into sort of my official test. So those two things, the amount of power and the amount of the sort of job it does in distributing the light. But then putting on sort of the best dimmer is such a good sort of thing to do with a fixture like this, right? Because that's sort of the third component. If you're going to give them more light than they need, you need to distribute it really well. But then, also putting a really granular dimmer that has the precise sort of readout. So were you thinking about all of those things sort of together when you were designing the fixture?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, there's one aspect of optimizing the performance, absolute kind of technical details of the light. But the other half of it is the customer experience, right? Like the user experience. How do you actually interact with this thing? And, one of the things that we've noticed in a lot of lights on the market is, and it's actually a feedback that we got really early on was like, well, I don't know how to dim this thing. Like, what should I be setting this at? And I think giving that extra control to users, making it both precise and repeatable has been one of the primary design goals for the Hydra series.
That's really what I think is the innovation with regards to the dimmer is both the precision and the granularity. A lot of the competing fixtures either have precision, but they don't have granularity. Like they'll lock in at 20% or 25% increments, which may be fine if you're thinking about running the light for seedlings and then for flowering or whatever, and you just want to crank it up once. But it's not good for sort of dialing in the perfect density for your grow, because you have pretty big steps that you're forced to take. And then the other style of dimmer is to just have a continuously adjustable thing with just a needle pointing off in one direction, and you're never sure that you have sort of the same setting that you think you have. And you end up plugging into a power meter for verification, but your dimmer box basically serves that function.
Yeah, exactly. And also, some people, don't have the luxury of affording a par meter, right? And I think part of this is to try to give as much information as we can without you having to go and buy a $400 meter.
Yep, I agree. People ask me that all the time, and I'm like, you need good information more than you need a meter in a tent. But I saw that we had Hydroplanes Drifter join us. So welcome and congratulations, Hydroplanes Drifter. Is he there?
He unmuted, but I don't hear him.
We don't hear you.
We don't hear you. Where are you? Congratulations, though, if you can hear us. I can't wait to hear your excitement.
Okay, how about now?
There you go.
Why isn't my logo showing up in my thing here? Let me see. I just realized my logo. Audio avatar. Okay. I don't seem to be able to get my audio avatar. Do we have him? Is he on or not?
Yes, I can hear him now, and I don't know if you have your camera on.
I don't have a camera. But
no,
I'm
Dr.
MJ because I'm an idiot.
There we go. Is this Hydroplanes Drifter?
Yes, sir. It's nice to be
here.
Hey,
congratulations.
I knew I had your number last night when I saw the preview, and I'm like, he's making a big deal about that 59%. So this is the third one I've actually hit right on the screws, but Heyron 420, his actually showed up quicker on your guys' screen for the Mogabe.
Oh, okay.
So okay. I got a SQ 300.
You got to get out of my head. I'm gonna have to do something about this. Man,
yes, it's a little bit creepy. I'm in there a little too deep, but
yeah, you're in there a little too deep. I always think I'm being super clever, but I actually think I've only been I've only had a number that nobody guessed exactly the right number once. So I'm probably not as clever as I think. But hey, you're pretty clever for getting inside my head and figuring it all out.
Well,
but yeah.
Whenever I've needed it, I really wanted that SQ300 because I have a 3x3 and I was cobbling together kind of a mess of an array when I won that. And this one, I want to get a 4x2 because I actually think it's a better space than a 3x3. A 3x3 is kind of disappointing in a whole bunch of different ways. So this I want. If I win that big one on Wednesday, I'm going to give that away to somebody.
Oh yes, yeah, because that won't even fit in a 3x3. Well, I do know somebody that's running that. That's the Photon Tech 1000 watt fixture, and I know somebody that's got that in a 4x4. But I think they're only running 8 bars and running it at 40% or something. So you do need to have a lot of space for this. I agree. I think the 4x2. I grew in a 4x2 for a long time. I really like it because it's so accessible. You can just get to everything. For a home grower, it's an awesome size. And it produces plenty if you're growing well.
That's exactly my thought. Is I need a ton of humidifier, and so basically half of it would be gear, and the other half would be a plant. Whereas the 3x3 is you're stuffing things into corners, and it kind of needs a rear door, but they don't have one unless you get a Gorilla, and they're expensive. So yeah, it should be a whole lot better. A 3x3 should be, but it's kind of the worst of all worlds in a way. So,
yeah. So, hey, do you have any questions for Mike Lynn about your new light?
Not really. I mean, the video was amazing. That par map is really super duper amazing.
So let me ask you this. Are you going to try to run it in a 4x2 tent at full power? Or do you think you'd dial it down a little bit?
I mean, I'm probably going to go by, I use the Photon light meter on my phone,
Okay.
which I was able to calibrate really well because not only do I have a light that you did a review on, I have the light you did a review on. So I was able to run my own calibration inside the tent, get the right height and take a reading and tell my phone what it is. And it's been really good. So for the price of free, the Photon for Android is pretty killer. I mean, it's not as good as a real par meter, but it's way better than like just a wild ass guess. So I don't know. I'll probably try to run it full speed, but it's nice to be able to, turn it down and turn it up and to actually know where you are. I have a light with an infinite dimmer now. It's just a cheap Viper Spectra. But it's really easy to bonk that with your head, and then you're like, it looks a little bit bright or dim, and then you go check with your meter. It's like, oh, well, that's cool. I've been frying them for 4 days because there's no notches on it. This, at least, if you bonk it, you know where you were. That's really neat.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it's funny because a couple of years ago, I didn't really think dimmers were super important at all on lights. And a lot of that is because nobody had enough. I mean, everybody should be running their lights at that a couple of years ago at full power, especially growers with LEDs, because nobody was really sort of saturating their space with light. But now with the cost of LEDs coming down, people can fill in the space and have more light. I really kind of think this is a little bit more light than most home growers will. I think they'll do better at 90% power, maybe 95% power. But I love having that sort of top end performance.
Well, like right now, I'm running into heat problems. I actually started my spring autos a couple days ago. I meant to start them 2 weeks ago, but I didn't have a tent open because I'm running into heat. It's spring and it's a desert, so I have the SQ300 is turned down to, I think it's at 75% or 50%, because it's dropping me, a really critical 2 or 3 degrees in flower. So that, to me, that's going to be a whole, that's to me the most important thing. If the driver's not removable, at least the ability to turn it down and bring it down lower, because I also don't pack my tent with plants. Mm-hmm. So if I can get the same PPFD running it at 50% on a hot day, then that's a pretty good thing for me. Is shaving off a couple watts can make a huge difference this late in flower. Is the difference between 80 and 75 is going to be huge for how much of your terpenes actually stay put.
Yeah, not getting running it too hot. Yeah, what do you think about that, Mike? Somebody asked in the chat, and Jordan just followed up, thinking about hanging it lower and running it dimmer versus hanging it higher and running it at full power.
Yeah. So I think if you can get lower with lower wattage, I think that's, the way to go. Obviously, I think, again, the point of this is to give you a lot of different options, right? The point of the fixture. And for example, if you want to, hang this light at the top of your tent and just dial it in and you don't have to move it, that's one way to approach it. But at the end of the day, if you're, all it is PPFD, right? Like the density of light hitting your plants. And if you can lower your fixture and turn it down, and that works for you, then
yeah. One of the things I would think about, the fact that it distributes the light so well. Usually when you lower a light towards the target, the coverage area will get smaller and the PPFD will get more intense, denser, because you're coming from a single point of light, like a HPS bulb or something. So if you have an HPS bulb that's up at 3 feet above the canopy, it's going to be throwing light over a wide area. If you have it only 1 foot above the canopy, it's only going to be covering a much smaller area, but at much more intense light. With a fixture like the Hydra, it's doing a lot of the distribution work itself. So the light is sort of already distributed to a large extent along the bars and between the bars. So changing the height has less of an impact on density at sort of any target than it would if it was a single point source of light, like a bulb. So what you're going to get, and you know, all of this will apply to some extent to this fixture, does such a good job. It covers almost the entire canopy. You got really low, you know, you're not going to be getting a lot of light out to the ends, and you'd get into a situation eventually where you would getting troughs and ridges, you know, directly below each individual bar. But I didn't really test it test it in this kind of a situation. You certainly could lower it and dim it a little bit, but I don't think you're going to be able to get the same density with a good distribution. For example, running it at like half power or less. If that makes sense.
Now I do have the par maps that I can.
Oh yeah, you can put some of the bar maps up on the screen. You can see.
I don't know which one in particular. There's your
specifics. That's the 5090. Give us the full strength par map.
Okay.
Check out the full strength par map.
That would be the par map without the E-par.
Yeah. So certainly, as we lowered the fixture, if we're just imagining it, keeping it at 100% power, as you lower the fixture, you're going to get patterns to start to emerge in this as you got closer and closer. I think the first thing you'd start to see is right in the center, like where the 980s, 990s, and the 1000 are, that would start to go up. And in the corners and along the far ends, the density would start to drop there. It probably wouldn't change much in the rest of the map at first. As you got closer and closer, again, staying at 100% power, you'd be able to almost start to see where the bars were if you took enough samples in the par map. I certainly think you could cut the hanging height down to about 12 inches and run it at like 70% power, and you'd be fine. I'm not sure you'd get quite to that density, but you'd get a good distribution at that. You wouldn't get a good distribution out to the ends, though. I don't know if that really helps hydroplanes drift a bit.
Well, I was just thinking, I'm totally unrelated.
Yeah.
About
Okay.
the only other thing I could think of that you could do with a dimmer that would be amazing on something of this form is to be able to dim left and right separately, almost like it was two separate 2x2s. So if you have one plant that's growing higher, if you're growing two different strains, or one gets away from you, or you want to run a perpetual thing where you've got one that's in a different phase of growth, you can have this side at 93% and the other side at 27%. I'm sure that's probably a really expensive thing to do because it sounds cool.
It might not be, but I sort of wonder, I think the use for that would be in the situation where your plants were getting too close to the light and you wanted to dim it in the area where they were getting too close to the light. I don't think it would, well, I don't really know if it's necessary to do if you had like smaller plants on one side and larger plants on the other side. Like there's, light will spread out in the space the same way that sort of water will fill in the entire swimming pool, no matter where you put the hose. So there's a little bit that you could do there, but I wonder, I think the better use of that might be when the plants got too tall, but you don't, it's always sort of a catch-22 to dim them at that point because you're going to be costing yourself yield.
That's true, but you don't want to kill the very top, the best.
Yeah, no, I know.
You don't want to have your premier colas, drive
I definitely hear you.
What's that?
I said I definitely understand that. Yeah, no, it's a tough call always when you're in that situation. So what do you think about that, Mike? What do you think about having...
I think that's an interesting idea. I think from a cost perspective, it certainly adds something, right? There's some additional hardware and a little bit more design. It's not, I don't think it's crazy, but I do think the challenging bit is, like the thing that we have to think about is, how do we make something that's applicable for a lot of people, that is useful for kind of the general use case. And if we have, say, left to right, well, does your are you going to have those growth differences exactly 50% left and right, or is it like 30% in your grow is like going out of control or something, in which case splitting that like 50-50 is not necessarily the most helpful thing. I think the solution in that case, honestly, is probably just 2 fixtures that you can adjust independently. Yeah.
It probably would end up being more of a bullet point.
You said there. Well, sorry. Mike, thinking about, something that's applicable to a lot of different growers. So when you're thinking about your customer and the people that are going to be buying the lights that you're designing, who is your sort of prototypical customer in your mind that you're kind of designing, say, the Hydra 3200 for?
Sure. So I think, again, there's kind of a broad answer to this, right? We're trying to obviously design for a lot of people. We want to address a lot of user needs, but I think the person that we're looking for is not necessarily just looking for outright lighting performance, but they value some of the usability and the components that we choose. And obviously this isn't the cheapest light on the market. We can do that if we wanted to, but I think we're aiming for a more holistic package where it's a high performance light. It gives you a little bit more headroom than you need, kind of peace of mind, so to speak, if you were to ever go to a larger space, or even if you're building out your own room or something, where it's not exactly 2x4, maybe it's like 2.5 by 5 or something like that. Just someone who values a little bit more control and more holistic package.
Yeah. You imagine most people are running these in individual fixture, like one fixture grows, right? You're not thinking about outfitting like larger rooms with an array of the Hydra 3200.
We've had some inquiries about this, actually. We talked to some people, but realistically, you'd probably go with multiple 4x4 fixtures for a big room.
A larger frame.
Yeah. But something like this, you could get 2 of them for a 4x4, or potentially even maybe a 5x5. But yeah, probably like a 4x4 too.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of close to one of my plans of, once I can figure out how to stuff it into my grow room, is I want to have a 5x5. I don't plan on putting a whole bunch of plants in there, but trying to control the environment is really difficult with a small tent. And I have to put gobs of water. I mean, I live in New Mexico, and it's literally 5% RH outside my front door right now. So being able to control that space, I don't really need 5x5 with 25 plants in it. But if I have 2 or 3 there and just light one side of it, that's actually one of the plans I had for it. Is, I wanted something that would basically light half of it, the other half, humidifiers and a lounge chair and whatever else, and just hang out inside the tent to be able to balance it better. Because trying to balance the humidity left and right across a 3x3 is impossible. It can change.
Are you really going to put a lounge chair in your 5x5?
Why not? I'm not going to fill it with plants. If you've ever seen the plants I grow, they're tiny. My current one's 10 inches tall. I mean,
That's amazing. You need to post a picture of that.
I want the
I'd
big,
love to
yeah,
see that.
underneath the grow light, right? Or like having it in there. You gotta have the sunglasses on. You should have like a cocktail, you know.
well, yeah. I mean, if I had cats, they could go out in there and hang out under the lamps with me and just go in there, read a book. But to be able to go in the tent and goof with your plants, because also if I open the door on my 3x3, my humidity goes from 49% to 14% while I'm, in there goofing around, and that can't be good. Even if it's a short
No.
time, it's a shock. It's like, somebody's walking in and kicking you in the balls for 5 minutes, and then things go back to normal.
Do you run yucca in your water?
I did when I was doing my CoCo. Right now I'm doing hempy buckets because I just like to make a mess of things. So I am going to be doing it with my soil grow that I just started too, because it's got enough peat in it that I want to make sure that it doesn't get hydrophobic and just start running into the cracks.
Well, one of the things yucca does is helps plants deal with those climate swings, or the swings in climate. And you're absolutely right. The biggest swing in the climate for our plants, in like a commercial facility, they're always worried about when the lights go off, because when the lights go off, the temperature drops, the RH climbs. They'll be sort of prepared for that. That's true for home growers too, but home growers do something much more dramatic, which is opening the door. Opening the door on these spaces can, like you just said, crash the humidity very quickly. And that is something that the plants have to respond to.
Yeah, it's always challenging here because I get a lot of evaporative cooling. I get about 6 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit of evaporative cooling during veg when my humidifiers are on. So I actually have to run a heater in a room that's otherwise 75 degrees in order to keep it above 72 degrees in the tent. So when the lights go out, I have to kill the humidifier so I don't get a dew point. But then my temperature also actually climbs for a bit after my lights go out because I'm not getting the evaporative cooling. So there are a whole bunch of strange tipping points when you're in, I'm sure it's in every climate, but a desert is just weirder if you're throwing so much water in there and you do get so much cooler effect.
It's interesting because I think having a really dry climate, the heat is never helpful, but having a really dry climate, I think, is easier to grow in than having a really wet climate. I mean, there's stuff you can do with a really dry climate. And it's a whole lot easier to put water into the air than it is to take it out.
Exactly. You're going in one way. I'm always throwing water in. I'll never have to worry about taking it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you there. But I also, I'm going through like 15 gallons a week of water from the store because the water that comes out of my tap would kill anything. Humidifiers, plants, I wouldn't drink it, so I wouldn't pour it in my plants. But yeah,
so you think the Hydra 3200 is going to go into one side of your 5x5? Is that what I'm hearing?
If I can make things work with a 5x5, living situation, enough space to get around it. It's in a bedroom, and the big problem there is power draw, but it's also, it's a 12x12 bedroom. So being able to access both sides, being able to talk my wife into it, things like that. Because I would love to have a 5x5. I don't really want to spend $400 at Gorilla for a 5x5, but be able to go in there, train my plants with the door closed, because I goof with my plants a lot. I go beat them with a wrench. I mean, I'm just bad. If I'd leave them alone, they'd probably be a lot healthier. But I could do that with the door closed and not have the humidity swing, and that would be a lot better. Or the heat swing too.
I hear you. No, that's everybody's got to set up a grow that works for them. Like I never go into my tent when the lights are on. Period. Like, and if I have to go into the tent, well, when the lights are on, which I do, but I turn the light off when I go in there. I don't like working under the light. I got to be around high-powered LEDs a lot more than like most people, I guess, because I do a lot of testing, and they'll start to mess with my eyes. So I use a lot of eye protection when I'm testing, and I try to just avoid the sort of being in the presence of the high-powered LEDs. So I will say, invest in some good eye protection for this plan of the lounge chair in the 5x5 with Atrium Hydra and your couple of plants. Sounds like a nice space though.
Well, I have the little sunglasses things for them anyway. It drives me nuts. I just poking my head in there for a second and it's just blinding off of the off of the Mylar already. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
anybody who's
we're
going
gonna have Mike for a couple more minutes. I want to get some more questions over to him. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about the question that's on the screen there now, Mike. Any advantage to lowering light densities towards the end of flower, the last week of flower?
I'm not
thoughts on
as
that?
familiar with this, so I don't know. Maybe you, Doc, could weigh in on it. But
There's some thoughts there. On the one hand, you want light for photosynthesis and growth. On the other hand, your light will burn off some of the terpenes and some of the cannabinoids that we're trying to cultivate. I tend to think not really, although with the caveat that if you're running autoflowers on a really long light cycle, I would give them some darkness towards the last week of flowering. So I would extend it that way. But I wouldn't necessarily lower the PPFD, but I would make sure that autoflowers got 12 hours of darkness before they got harvested, for example. So any other questions for Mike, either from Hydroplanes or maybe Hemp with Gigi has anything that we'd like to get into?
No, I was kind of interested in the same question Smart was asking. With this
Oh,
light
yeah.
having such control and everything, it seems like this would be the light if that did play out where you're wanting to introduce more density towards the end of your flower. But you kind of answered that already. But yeah, I felt if any light could do it, it'd be this one. No, that's an amazing par map. And the E-par map is even more crazy. Like, hats off to Mike for an amazing build.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate it. This was what I wanted to win. Like I said, I don't want the 1,000-watt light on Wednesday. I really wanted that chilled Growcraft. They actually have a better par map, and it's for about a fifth of the cost. So that's pretty sweet right there, and the coolest dimmer that there is.
Yeah.
One last question, kind of for Mike. I know you said you were designing this light to kind of have the space not to have to run it at max for that. Were you thinking of CO2 growers at this point? I know that small space is kind of unpractical for CO2, but we do have some growers that like to get mushroom bags and stuff. Were you thinking about CO2 when you were building this light?
Yeah, to some extent. Obviously it's not necessarily a perfect match, but so basically on our end, we get a lot of really interesting comments from people, right? People have all sorts of weird use cases, or they ask just like super interesting things. So we try to incorporate some of these elements into our products. So for example, right, like CO2, hey, maybe you're not running it in a small space, but if you get two of these in a 4x4, potentially, right? So we were kind of thinking in that direction, but just generally the philosophy was, well, let's give a little bit more light, see what people do with it, right? And kind of see what the results are.
What was the max temperature that those drivers tend to run for people that maybe have heating issues? Do those driver, does that driver run hot? I know you made it so you could take it off the light.
No, I
No?
looking for my actual test. It is in the video. I did test the driver, but I don't.
I think it was about 52,
51 like
C,
51.7.
Yeah.
Yeah, I clocked it at just under 52 degrees, which is pretty reasonable. And it is removable from the grow space. I like that because the whole dimmer comes sort of along with it. I'd put it up on like the top of my tent and be able to see it from. I'm kind of tall though. I guess if you were shorter, you could get something next to your tent to put it on. But you can at least get that heat out of there.
Yeah, I noticed in your video that you had it off the fixture there. And that would be what, about 125 in Fahrenheit? You said Celsius, so I just did the calculations for you.
Yeah, if you did the calculations, that sounds about right. I
will say that we've also had requests for the opposite direction, right? People saying, "Hey, I need more heat in my tent." People living in Canada, they kind of have the opposite problem that a lot of people typically have. So in this case, right, we'll say, "Hey, you can actually move the heat where you want it. So you can move it to the bottom of your tent, place the driver on the floor, and you kind of capture a little bit more heat for your tent. So yeah, all sorts of weird stuff that we hear from people, but it's awesome.
No, that is awesome.
Interesting one.
I like the design you made with the feet. Definitely you thought about people moving it and mounting it to something else, where there is some companies I feel like they make it movable, but then they don't have any afterthought of where you're going to or how you're going to mount it. So hats off on that design as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think that's exactly what I'm going to do, because I bring in air with an intake tube through an air filter box, and I can mount it hanging right in front of that so that the intake air is coming right across there, and that's free heat, because otherwise I have to run about a 500 watt heater all the time in veg just to keep it from being too cold in there. So free heat, or heat that I'm already paying for.
Yeah,
but you're actually doing your driver a bit of a favor. I mean, to the extent that you can keep the driver cooler, it's going to be more efficient. So, running air over it's not a bad idea for that, repurposing that heat. Sure. I don't think you're going to really move the needle too much with that, but every little bit sometimes really does help.
Well, that's amazing for sure.
Yep. So anybody in the chat, I'll put one more call out for sort of questions. The chat's come up with some good questions today too, and these were some interesting sort of lighting questions, and in general and specific to the Hydra 3200, which incidentally, Hydroplanes Drifter is still hanging up in my test area. So I've got to take it down and send it to you now. Damn.
Well, there's not a huge rush, because I still have a plant in my 3x3, and I've got a little 2x2 for starting my SAFC. That's the only time I'm ever going to say that. My spring autos.
SAFC? Yeah, SFAC is fine with me. Your spring auto power challenge.
So I'm in no rush to have that show up, because
no,
I won't be here in time to do the SAFC. It's probably going to have to be the fall.
PTGC.
What can you tell us? Because nobody's listening. Shh, I won't tell anybody.
Okay.
What the theme is for that one, so I could look for seeds ahead of time.
No, we don't know yet. We usually meet a few weeks after the challenge starts. So after the SFAC starts, we usually would meet and think up a theme. I'm not sure, but it's the PTGC is the Plant Training Grow Challenge. So we usually do groups based on your training method, and less sort of focus on the particular strains per se, more focus on the training method.
Okay.
Seems like we have a lot of questions about spectrum and maybe the effects of UVC and how much red would be in the light. I know I've seen that question further up.
Okay. Do you know what the power percentage is for the 660s, Mike, for the deep red?
The power percentages. I don't remember that off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can't measure that. I did measure the far red. Comes in at about 4% off the LED, the Letistar full spectrum diodes. That's the difference between the EPAR and the PAR is the 7 to 750 nanometer wavelengths. But there's going to be a lot more red in the 660 nanometer range of the sort of deep red. That's within PAR, so it's counted in both of the tests. Not the diode count, but yeah, I didn't have the.
And there's no UVB or UVA or anything in that.
No, let me talk about UV for a second. I am interested in hearing what Mike has to say, if he agrees with this or not. But UV, certainly C, which is really short wavelength light, dangerous light. UVB is pretty dangerous too. That's a little bit longer, and then UVA is the sort of closer to 400. There are some grow lights that include some UVA chips. There's even a couple that include a couple UVB chips, but they don't put out a lot of light in those spectrums. They don't put out a lot of micromoles of flux in those wavelengths. And my attitude is if you wanted to use them, you would want more flux than that. And you wouldn't want it as part of your full spectrum grow light. you would want it as a separate fixture that you could use for specific purposes. So I kind of think that if a fixture puts a couple of diodes like that, it's more for marketing the fixture sometimes than it is for actually the performance that you're going to get out of it. But I'm curious what Mike has to say about that.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this before, and I'm
Yeah.
generally in agreement. I think from the light design standpoint, yeah, right. The UV chips right now the lifetimes on them are just not the same, and I would not put them on the same fixture. I would definitely have it as an additional supplement. And also they're typically on different light cycles anyways. So, you can have multi-channel fixtures. I just don't think there's any point in integrating it into your fixture at this point.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many other variables that don't lend themselves to just fitting in one fixture.
The other side of this, I think, is that UV light is more efficient from other technologies. It's more efficient from fluorescence. So that's why you'll see a lot of UV tubes that are fluorescent tubes instead of LED diodes. LED diodes are now much more efficient in the PAR wavelengths, but pretty much not outside of that. Like the UV chips are less efficient than UV bulbs. And the IR is also not very efficient, those diodes. Is that your sense of the market as well, Mike?
I think at the moment that's accurate. Again, technology changes quickly, so I'm sure someone out there is making a really cool chip. But until we see it, we're constantly monitoring this kind of stuff, and if we see it tip over, then we'll go in that direction.
Yeah. I agree. I actually, endorsed your decision to go with the Letastar diodes on this as well. And to me, that suggested that you guys really are paying attention to the market and seeing sort of where quality is for price. I think that, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in real quick.
Yes,
that's been a question we've got a lot about what exactly the diodes that we're using. But maybe I'll speak to the process. So what we do is actually we're essentially doing a sphere test for individual diodes. That's kind of the base of what we do, and it takes a lot of resources and it's pretty expensive. But we're just testing various diodes that we can get and evaluating their performance at different current, different power settings. And then it's kind of a cost benefit trade-off, right? Like how, when you assemble it in a system, you can, if each diode is less expensive, you can use more of them and potentially get better overall system efficiency.
Exactly.
So it's not quite as simple as just looking at the efficiency of a single diode. But it's also like, how do you put it all together? What driver are you using? How are you arranging all the diodes? Those types of details tend to be lost in kind of some of these efficient PPE numbers that people quote.
Especially from the diodes themselves, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about, the number of diodes that you use absolutely affects the efficiency of the diodes. Like how much wattage goes to each individual diode affects its efficiency. So if you took two diodes, and this is just sort of underlining what you just said, but if you took two diodes that tested, the same, or one even tested better at the same power draw, but you threw in more diodes and lowered the power to each individual diodes of the other one, they could easily surpass the efficiency of that other diode. So the number you have, how hard you're driving them, what that's going to end up costing, right? All those,
Yeah, exactly. And there's a million other factors out there. With the semiconductor shortages out there, there's some crazy lead times. So that's kind of forced us in some cases to go looking around for alternatives. And I think in our case, that was not the only driving force to look beyond the Samsung diodes. But I think we've landed on something pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. I think
then,
the Samsung diodes have a pretty big price premium built into them in this market now too. So, you know, there are other diodes that are as good or that you can put together into systems and run more efficiently at a better cost, because you're paying a bit for the brand at this point.
yeah, and definitely not knocking Samsung. I think they have one of the top diodes out there,
For sure.
But certainly a couple years ago they were noticeably better than everyone else.
Right.
But no one stands still, right? Everyone's kind of hustling to catch up. So there's a lot of interesting and good options out there. Just really depends on how you put it together. And the other thing I'll say is, our testing, right? Like after we build the prototypes, we do all of our testing with CSA Group, which is actually one of the standards organizations that writes these lighting protocols. So, it's a pretty legit test facility. And I think the numbers that we get, we can trust, with high confidence. So that's kind of our process, how we go about building a fixture.
Excellent. What's next for Atrium Lighting? You guys got any new fixtures coming down the line?
Yeah, so let's see. I'll be a little coy, but
You should be a little coy.
but
break your news here. But
but I would say a larger fixture is kind of the logical next step.
Yeah.
But we also aren't. We've heard the feedback, right? Like we definitely on the price point side, we are certainly on the slightly higher end. But yeah, I think we're looking at ways, interesting ways potentially to bring a high performance, but try to bring the price point down as well. So that's generally the direction that we're looking in.
That's the challenge in the industry. Anyways, I'm definitely impressed with what you did with the 3200. I think it's going to be a really popular light for home growers that really want to be able to have like total control over the amount of light and the power that they're running in their 4x210. And I really think 4x210s are a great size for home growers, and a little bit neglected by grow light manufacturers who I think probably think you could just put together 2x2 lights if you needed to fit them in there. But it's nice to see a light like this that a lot of thought went into for the 4x2 space. It gives the 4x2 growers out there some love.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think the 4x2 size has been a little bit neglected for sure.
Yeah, we do have one question on the way out. Big Bad Wolfie's asking about daisy chaining. There are ports on the control board for daisy chaining fixtures, correct?
There are, yes. It's on the control box. So if you look next to the screen, there's two RJ11 ports, and comes with the cables. You can just daisy chain them. They'll also accept input from other controllers, so you can set an entire chain of these as kind of the follower lights, and you can have like a Troll Master control it.
Perfect.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's amazing that you're kind of challenging that whole Samsung epidemic. But I had a question for Hydro Planes before we lose him. Is there anybody or any way we can follow you using this light? Are you going to be part of the CoCo challenge, or is there a journal site that you use we can kind of watch you grow with this light?
Well, I have a Spring Autos journal started, and I have one for New York, whatever.
Over at
New York
CoCo
Grow Challenge.
New York Grow Challenge.
Okay.
And an Instagram, but there's no way I'll be using this before the fall thing, because I'm not going to grow inside when it's 95 out here all summer. Going to be taking a break. I thought about doing outside plants, and then I'm like, it's 5% humidity,
Yeah, it's brutal.
They'd be pretty awesome, so I'll just skip it and
if you do grow with it, definitely we'd like to follow you. So I guess CoCo for Cannabis would be the place to kind of watch out for when you do use that light.
It sounds like the Plant Training Grow Challenge in August.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Wonderful. I wanted to take a second here to let everybody know, please subscribe to the Hemp with GG YouTube channel while you're here. But Gigi does some great shows. I was on a couple of weeks ago. We did a cool show on using carbon dioxide in your grow. You can find that in the videos, and does new shows every week. So sub up to our wonderful host here, who is gracious enough to provide us the channel to do this after show. And congrats again to Hydroplanes Drifter for winning, and we'll look forward to watching you grow with that in August probably. And thanks a lot, Mike. This was fun to have you come on the after show and talk about the light and talk about what's going on in Atrium and stuff like that. So I really appreciate getting to interact with you like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This has been a lot of fun. Again, like I said at the beginning, this is the first time I've done a live event like this, but you've done a really awesome job. Like from the intro all the way to this after show, it's been amazing.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was a lot of fun for me. I love doing the giveaways and getting everybody excited for that. So thanks for being a good partner on this one. And this was a lot of fun. So
thank you all for coming. Yeah. And growers loved everybody in the chat. I hope you have an amazing rest of your night.
Grower love, everyone.
Growers love.
Have a good night.
Have a good night. And this is Hemp with Gigi. Keep growing happy, healthy plants.